Hello and welcome to the Well Built Podcast. This is Chad Prinkey. I'm doing an interview today with two friends of mine. They are Russell Tipton and Patrick Hennessy, who are the creators of TeamWeave, which is a software product born out of Harkins Builders, which is a really strong general contractor based in the Mid-Atlantic region. So these two are joining us to talk about a host of things, but they're here to talk about possibly the coolest story we've had on the show, which is how a contracting company got into the software business, and how that originally happened and how it continues to progress. Russell, Patrick, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having us, Chad.
Thanks for having us, Chad. I appreciate it, man. Great to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Well, good. So I'm going to start off just by way of context. I think I've had my hands on your product, and would just like to give a little bit of context for what the thing does, and then we can get into the why you went down this road and how it all kind of materialized. But in general, this is a resource planning tool designed for contractors to map out all of their projects.
Correct.
And all of their resources against those projects, be they project managers, superintendents, foremen, labor, doesn't matter, right?
Yep.
To lay all their resources against those projects and be able to forecast where we're going to put all of our people and where we need people and so on. Is that a good description of the of the platform?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
think, the goal is to reduce time on the bench, to reduce overhead, to make sure that your folks are utilized and that you're not just burning dollars doing tasks that aren't associated with projects or that you may have, not even noticed that somebody has a large gap in between one project or the next. And more recently, what we've seen is it also works for in-house, more corporate level tasks as well. So if you're doing in-house, like reviews of like drawings and submittals and shops, or if you're doing in-house drafting, within your organization, or on the pre-construction side, if you have, sprints, more like an agile type of sprint where you're doing a SD budget, a DD budget, a GMP budget, and these things happen in these 90-day sprints, it can be project level, and that's where the field focus really comes in. And that's our primary focus. But software itself is so configurable, it's now being used for really task-based resource management as well. But you hit the nail on the head, Chad. It's resource planning software built for the AEC industry.
Awesome. All right, good rundown. And so I this is one of my pet topics that I've got to dive into right out of the gate. Is at Well Built we work with 100 contractors or something like that, and I would bet at any point in time 50% of those contractors are clamoring for, we need project managers, we need supers, we need estimators, we need, like that kind of stuff. And my go-to answer is, do you? Do you? How do you know? How do you know? Is it just because your people are busy? So and your people are saying they're busy. We need more resources. What operational staff member doesn't want more resources, right? So that they can reduce their own workload. And so I guess I'll ask you guys, take me to the before times. Was that happening at Harkins?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, sure. To some extent. I mean, so, like most other 95% of general contractors, especially the trade partners, we were doing it. If you dial back 9 years ago, we were doing it in Excel, right? And we were going through a big period of growth, right? Just like everybody else, we had 80 names on a list, and you meet twice or every 2 weeks and go over the list. And it's more a a retroactive of who's where and, oh my God, do we need to hire somebody for, next week, as opposed to, true forecasting and planning, which is where most people are, right? So, we were going through a growth period there. We knew we needed to do something better. We took it from Excel to Microsoft, or to, sorry, Primavera P6, right? To throw it in some kind of an automated program where I can allocate resources and all that. And I was the one managing that process, right? And so, they gave me the Excel spreadsheet and said, all right, we're doubling in size over the next 2 years. We need to figure this out. And so we ran with it for, in P6 for a while. And then, of course, you get bigger, and now that doesn't work too. That becomes, a lot of manual entry and update, and it's still static. You're meeting every 2 weeks. You're doing a staffing meeting. You're making all your changes. You're doing your reports. You put the reports out there, and then 3 hours later, everything's changed, right? Those 2 jobs slid, and that job's gone. And hey, another one we just won, we need to start planning for. And, whatever the plan was on Friday afternoon at 3:00 is different on Monday at 3:00. So, that's what really set us on the search for, there's got to be something better. And we went out to what was out in the market, and there was really only 1 or 2 options out there. And,
Yep.
Neither of them did what we were doing internally at the time. So just the things that we were doing in terms of updating, forecasting, things like that out of the system we were using, they weren't one-to-ones. So it wasn't really going to do it for us. And, that's kind of where Patrick came in here. I'll toss it over to Patrick, but we were like, there's got to be a better way, and maybe we can build something ourselves. And kind of that's where Patrick came in and said, yeah, we can do this, and took us down that road.
Awesome.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead, Patrick.
Well, I was just going to say,
no, you got it, buddy.
Kind of chime in a little bit. I think it's important to set the stage a little bit for like what Russell and I, what our roles were at Harkins at this time, and kind of how we ultimately ended up stumbling into a place where now we find ourselves as creators of software that's on the market, and actively being sold right now, and developed and being built better. So we were basically in charge, Russell and myself, of what's called the project controls division at Harkins. Now many construction companies, once you get to around the same size as Harkins was at this time, around 2019, 2020, many construction companies have a similar type of division. I'm not certain that all of them call it the project controls division, but it's basically a division for operational betterment, operational efficiency, a support division, and in our case that housed our in-house scheduling, in-house VDC services, in-house quality control, and in-house safety services. But what we were doing, along with managing all of those kind of sub departments, is we were also constantly looking for feedback from our people, talking to our folks on the front line, and corporately on the front line, but both in the field and corporately, and understanding where we were missing the mark in terms of a process that we had at Harkins. And it became clear, A, because Russell was the one managing the spreadsheets, but B, because all of the executive team that was a part of these staffing and resource planning meetings was constantly kind of reiterating this notion that resource planning was not hitting the mark for us at Harkins. So we did what we do, which is we looked for what we could do to create operational efficiency and become better as an organization for that one particular process.
Okay. Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I find that, and I find myself actually a little bit between a rock and a hard place sometimes when I'm talking with our clients, that, for example, one of our clients, they're about $80 million general contractor, somewhere in that zone, really good company. And their resource planning happens on a whiteboard.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Right. And it's got little magnets, right? It's got the names, and the same person's name is on like 5 magnets, right? And they're getting all shuffled around. And I go into that business, and of course, like so many things. By the way, I can say the same thing about a CRM system, right? They're using a spreadsheet instead of a CRM system. They're, and so on, right? Manual time cards instead of a time tracking software, and yada, yada, yada. Anyway, back to this example. This client I'm looking at this. I'm like, this is like, you know, not mature as a model for resource planning. You know, we got to get you guys on a software. And, you know, he's like, dude, it ain't broke. My system is working for me. I feel really good about this system. And then as I dig into it, you know, I do find out that he's having basically like daily resource planning conversations, and that, you know, it takes about probably 6 to 8 hours of his week every week to keep up with this. And he's the CEO.
Yeah.
Right. And so anyway, I give you that story to say, like, a lot of our listeners, as you know, right, our listeners are construction owners and executives.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are like, look, man, I am softwared out. I you know, there's just, you know, enough already. It's about communication. It's about, you know, blah, 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 blah. Why does one need to go from the whiteboard to Excel, and from Excel to a software, you know, to a dedicated software platform?
Yeah, I can take
I mean,
a
for a
first stab
number
at
of
this,
reasons.
and then I'd love for Russell to chime in as well, since he really lived it. But for me, kind of keeping it high level, it's what you don't know, what you don't know, right? And sometimes you get into a groove, and like if that 6 to 8 hours was just a part of that individual's week in and week out, there was no like realizing that the grass is greener on the other side. You're just kind of going through your day to day. But I think if you have ambitions of growth as an organization, and whether you're at the top or you're middle management, or you're somebody who's trying to step up into middle management, an important concept is that you always have to end up delegating, right? You can't take it all on. And for high achievers, that's a tough concept to grasp a lot of times.
No doubt.
Oh, you mean this thing that I'm doing perfectly, that's working really well, I have to give that to somebody else? It's a really tough thing to give up in many cases, but you inevitably will hit a wall, because there's only so much that the human mind, the human body can take, right? So if you're really an individual that's listening to this, and you are that, you know, whiteboard, and you're saying, you know, well, it ain't broke. Well, what happens when you're 200 million? What happens when you're 500 million? Do you have those ambitions? And will it be broke then, or will that 6 to 8 hours become 20 hours, and then you can't manage the, you know, multi-$100 million company that you've built? So from a high level perspective, I can certainly understand that somebody has a, you know, a process that they feel like is working really well. But I would just encourage anybody who feels that way to think towards the future and roadmap, whether it's resource planning or any process that you have within your organization. Think about how you can do it more efficiently, because that's how you achieve high growth while still maintaining the margins that you're used to. And Russell, I'll let you chime in a little bit on maybe the more detail about why you know, you wanted to switch from the process that you were doing, that, to be quite honest, wasn't necessarily broke, but you realized that there was more that you could get out of it.
It was broke. It wasn't broke, but it was time consuming, right? And yeah, you don't know what you're not getting. I mean, I'll like, Chad, you guys last week talked about leadership bottlenecks, right?
Yep.
This is a prime example of one of those. How many hats are you going to wear, right? And which can you take off, right? And so usually the person who's spending 6, 8 hours a week on this is a CEO or COO or an owner or somebody who's really close to this process. And if you can make that 6 to 8 hours a week, 1 to 2 hours a week, and you can give a CEO or COO 15% of their time back, that's a pretty massive impact. You know, what else can you do turning around and focusing that time on your business, your people, developing others, right? With that time, which is really where you make an impact, right? So, I mean, it's not just about the time savings. I mean, I was spending 8 to 12 hours every other week. We did our staffing cycle every 2 weeks, right? It would take me 8 to 12 hours to get the updates, reports, forecasts, all that stuff done. That's 1 to 2 hours of TeamWeave. I gained 10 hours every 2 weeks, which is massive, right, in and of itself. But the real reason is you can't keep funneling all that. Not really. Another reason is you can't keep funneling all that information through one person. You get this information bottleneck of who controls staffing and who has the spreadsheet, right, or who has the Microsoft project schedule and knows where Johnny and Billy and Bobby is and where they're going next. So like another big thing that it did when we moved to TeamWeave and off of that system is now I have 20 execs who are in there with instant access to all the same information that I do in real time, anytime. And when something changes, they can see it. And when they want to go find information, they can get it. And so you move away from, hey, everything has to go through this one person who controls staffing to, wow, okay, well, now this person can talk to that person and figure out what Bobby's going next. And you don't, it's not just the time you spend on the process that you're saving by making it more efficient. It's completely leveling up how your company is talking about resources and planning resources so that that can spread out laterally and not have to create those kinds of bottlenecks. It's a key piece.
Awesome. Yeah. So, back to my pet topic of, do I need to hire? Do I not need to hire? Like, how are we actually fixed with resources, things like that? To me, that and what you just described, Russell and Patrick, but maybe more into the details of what Russell shared, dovetails with the with my theme, which is, truly understanding our capacity. So I've got to ask, time tracking best practices, time log, like you specifically called out, I got 10 hours back every 2 weeks. That's a very specific data point. And what I find, if I just lay it plain, is that most contractors, particularly GCs, side note, trade contractors aren't doing really any of this, which is a part of the reason that I'm not lumping them in. But like mostly GCs, they look at their resources more through the lens of like, do I have a place to put this guy where I can bill for him?
Yeah.
Right. And do I have the budget to absorb that billing? Do I have a place to put this guy? Am I going to be able to make money on this guy? If I don't, then I got to do layoffs. And if I do, and everybody's covered, well, then I need to add people. But like, pause, that's not, and where general contractors, I mean, just laying it plain, right? Like where general contractors make real money, above and beyond their 1.5% fees and the trash that they're expected to accept as profit margin, where they really do make money, and you can make a shitload of money as a general contractor, where they really do make money is double dipping, triple dipping, quadruple dipping on guys. And the only way you get there is by truly understanding capacity for that person and not just like blanket saying, well, like, well, he's going to be on that job and therefore that job is going to eat up all that guy's time. I want to take that person, spread them across 4 jobs, and, in pieces and parts. So it gets back to how do I get there? I got to tell you, I think you kind of have to be fanatical about time tracking. And I think it's got to be real deal time tracking. Like, and so I'll ask, Russell, were you time tracking down to the nth to understand? Like, yeah, I'm spending, 16 hours every 2 weeks on this thing, and I just grabbed back 10 of those hours. Or was that more of a gut feel? I guess what I'm really asking, are you part of the problem?
Well, I'm sure I was part of the problem, right? How can you not be? But no, I was definitely tracking that. I mean, we do our Friday morning staffing meetings, right? Which used to run 4 hours, right? And start at 7 in the morning. You get done with that at 11. You get out of there. You spend 5-6 hours. You finish it up on Monday, right? Reports have got to get out, or you finish it up over the weekend. So I mean, I'm tracking that time spent in terms of managing that process. But what moving to a system like TeamWeave also helped us do, which is what you're speaking to, is track true capacity of people, right? Because prior to that, when you're doing it in P6 or your spreadsheet or whatever you got, it's all gut feel. Oh, well, okay, is that project manager really busy? Yeah, well, it's a big job and, it's going to keep him busy versus the other guy who's got 2 small jobs and does he really have capacity? The ability to go in and have a system where you set rules and weightings and all that kind of stuff on it. And, you can load guys up with multiple jobs and see who's got 25% of juice free or 30% of juice free.
Right. So when I set up my project, and this is one of the things, having seen TeamWeave in action, and then I'm going to stop talking about the software itself, damn it, because it's turning into a full blown demo. But having put my hands on the project, or I'm sorry, on the software, and watched a few of our clients actually in the process of or having implemented it. What I've observed is that when you set up the project, you can provide a rough budget, an estimated budget for how much time, how much of an FTE this project will require, right? So that when I ask myself, is this project, is this person actually all the way utilized? Are they fully covered up? That I'm navigating away from the typical answer, which is I can bill for them, right?
Exactly.
I've got the capacity, but I've got the budget to bill for this entire person, so that's where they're going to live. Two, well, in fact, yes, I budgeted for a whole person on that job because I was able to sell it, and congratulations me. And I'm able to, use that person on 2 other jobs simultaneously, because in fact, this job is only going to cover that person up by 50%. And the tool actually gives you the ability to orchestrate that. But at the end of the day, and I know you guys don't have a time tracking software. Maybe I need to bring one of those on, next, or maybe that's your next project. But to me, I deeply believe that if I showed you what we do for time tracking, your jaw would drop. It's like we track every minute. Period.
Yeah, right.
My entire staff tracks every minute, every task, every project, every client that it rolls up to, so that I'm able to run profitability by client, by a task that we perform for that client. I'm able to identify who needs to tighten things up and be trained, who ought to be the people doing the training because they're clearly killing it and delivering the result in a fraction of the time, and so on and so on and so on. And it really, to me, does have to fundamentally map back to capturing that data in a very real way, so that when I put together the budget on a project for my project manager, I've actually got 46 hours for RFIs, 110 hours for OAC meetings, 36 hours for field walks, and so on and so on. And I break it down into cost codes, manage it that tightly, have the data so that now when I open up my software, my TeamWeave, I can load in, this is a project type A, and project type A's, I actually know my PM budget down to the hour, and this is how many hours I'm allocating for that job. And if it takes Sparky longer, that's Sparky's problem. Right. I have our standards that we're working here up against, and Sparky's going to have to work 60 hours because he needs to get better. And that's just going to be the way it is. So I love what you're doing. I think it is a next level kind of quality, and I think you're getting to the answer really effectively about why do I actually need a dedicated software when I have my whiteboard, guys. Is we've just been talking about it for the past 10 minutes. It's a compelling why you should be gravitating away from it, surrounding delegation, surrounding accuracy of data, and for me, this is just the only language I really know how to speak as a capitalist. Profit. You make a whole hell of a lot more money if you really have this dialed down, and whatever you're spending on the software is nothing compared to the profits that you stand to generate if you do it right. So I want to talk about how this whole thing happened inside Harkins. So one of the things I believe I know about Harkins is that you're an employee-owned company, yeah?
Yep. 100% employee-owned.
Yeah.
And so here's this employee-owned construction company and a couple of tech side, support side guys, right? That are not, you're not tech first, you're ops first. I get that. But that, technically capable operation support side guys who end up going from, Excel to working inside a different software to saying, screw it, we're building our own. Like, how did you end up deciding, screw it, we'll build our own? And then where I'm going next, which, think about, is then when did the company decide to fund it and make it a company?
Yeah. I think I can give a quick rundown of that. I mean, Russell kind of took you all through the story of him and how he started with Excel and took it to Primavera, and then I enter the equation because I joined Harkins right around 2018, which is when Harkins had about doubled in size, I believe, right, Russell? About 250 up to around 500 million back then, maybe just shy of 500. Fast forward to 2020, 2021, you're still up in that 500, getting close to 600 range, and that's when Russell's starting to feel the pain on Primavera, and so we're brainstorming. Like I said, this is a pain point. We're brainstorming one day, like, what can we do, right? So we actually tried to build something custom first in our CRM, which is Microsoft Dynamics. I think naturally a lot of time. Yes, naturally, a lot of times, like the CRM kind of feeds into the resource planning because you're already going to have your people in there. In many cases, you are at least saying this person is on this project. You're not necessarily doing resource planning, but you're like, who's the project manager? This person, right? At the very least, the
Well,
executive.
but furthermore, you also have your potential projects loaded into your
Your
CRM,
pipeline,
right? It's
your
so,
pipeline. E-
yeah.
Exactly right. So we start to build this out in like a Microsoft what they called scheduler component of Dynamics, and then we were using Power BI built in-house reports to do the output and the reporting off of it, and that was moderately better. But we thought it was going to be, miles better, right? So we spend about let's
Right.
say 2020 or so, half year through the end of 2020, and into the first part of 2021, kind of trying to deploy this new Microsoft Dynamics function that would be resource planning. It falls a little bit flat. And so we go back to the drawing board and we say, look, we're really not saving any time on this. In fact, I think it actually took a little bit more time to update than Primavera did, although the reporting was slightly better. Um, and we said, well, what's on the market? And we didn't really see anything that satisfied the very specific needs of Harkins with anything that was on the market at that time. And so we actually had within Harkins what's called our Innovative Capital Reinvestment Board. Okay. ICR board. And imagine this as a miniature Shark Tank within Harkins Builders. If you have an idea,
Oh, how
um,
fun.
yeah, if you have an idea and you want to get it funded, and that can be an idea about a pilot of a new software, or that can be an idea about a new, robot or drone or something you want to try out on a job site, some type of specialized construction entrance for erosion sediment control was used on one of our job sites funded through this program, right? So we actually put together a proposal and we submitted it to the ICR. We got funded for our first, I think what was about 100K at that time to go out and to develop the software internally for Harkins. So fast forward from that time around mid 2021 to 2022, that was when our first line of code was written. And really 2022 was a year full of development just to get to a version 1 and MVP. So there were moderate, what one might call beta releases throughout the course of 2022. We kind of shook up who we were working with in terms of our developers. We had met a couple folks who kind of came on board as advisors at the time as well and worked with us through the development process. And we just learned as we went, and we released our official MVP at the end of 2022 to Harkins, and we really said, "Have at it now, everybody! Go and use this product." And through the early part of 2023, it landed so tremendously well during those staffing meetings. Russell, he's talking about the 12 hours goes down to 2 hours, and it is just hitting the mark. And we're like, wow, this, it doesn't always go this well. Believe me, when you're talking to two guys who have dealt with operational processes and efficiencies within a general contractor for dang near close to a decade, if not longer for Russell, it doesn't always go that well. And this one just hit the mark. And so around, I would say the second half of 2023, we started, kind of, I don't want to say bragging about it, but talking to our network, talking to our friends who are in the industry. What are you guys doing? We just built this thing. It's been working great for us. Similar to what you're saying, Chad, is like we use a whiteboard, or I don't even know. I don't know if we're doing anything. And we started looking at each other. We said, man, there's a large gap here. And we just developed something that's really hitting the mark for us. We should, test this and see how it would work on the market. So we, through the kind of second to third quarter of 2023, took it from a single tenant software built explicitly within our software infrastructure, and we then hosted it on AWS, moved it up into the cloud, and made it a multi-tenant, SaaS platform. And we started bringing on our first customers in Q3, Q4 of 2023 under what we would consider probably stealth mode. So for us, it was really an opportunity twofold. Number one, it provided bringing in other customers, and just doing demos and taking prospect calls really makes the software better, obviously, because as you know better than anybody, Chad, we all are general contractors and we all are going for the same thing at the end of the day, which is an on budget and on schedule project with a high fee. But we all have a little bit of a different way of getting there for some reason at the end of the day within our organizations. And we started to learn about, okay, well, we need to change this to make it more configurable for the grand masses, and we need to change this to make it more configurable and applicable to the grand masses. And so through that, the software just became an ultimately configurable, workable software for anyone who needs to attack resource planning in this industry, all the way to the point where now, fast forward a little over 2 years later, we can even track things like drafting and budgeting and pre-construction estimating and sprints inside the thing with ease because of the ultimate configurability of it. So that's really, for us, it was, let's make the software better, because now, instead of it being kind of umbrellaed within just our organization, now we get the benefit of the feedback of the masses. But number two, just from talking with our peers in our network and realizing that this is a problem in the industry, we felt it was a really unique opportunity, I think, for us to give back to the industry through this product that we've been able to make, and allow others to be able to use it as well. While also being able to pay back the funds that we put into the software through the initial ICR program. So a really win-win for everyone in our eyes. And that's what prompted us to officially, quote unquote, release to the market with a marketing and everything. The company itself is a subsidiary in June of 2024. And now we're about a year and a half into that process.
Awesome. Great rundown. Hell of a story.
Yeah.
I love the Shark Tank.
Yeah. The ICR is a really cool thing at Harkins.
I wanna be on one of those Shark Tank boards. See if you can put in a good word for me.
We should do guest.
We can get you in for a guest spot. Yeah.
Yeah, guest advocates or guest voters for one of the sessions. That'd be pretty fun.
Oh. Yeah.
So wholly owned by Harkins.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Which is wholly owned by the employees.
Correct.
Yep.
And so what I think is kind of the really rare part of this story is I wonder how many examples of this actually exist, especially in the construction industry, where there is a tech startup inside the company that is for the benefit of all.
Man.
Which is that's pretty wild. I mean, like, if you have, I don't know, you tell me if I'm crossing the line here, but like any intention to sell the thing?
At some point, potentially. I mean, I don't, I don't know if
we'll, maybe not sure.
I don't know if we should run that, but no, I think potentially, and Russell, you can do your, I think Russell has a really well thought out example and answer to the wholly owned and how it ties back to the ESOP piece. But Russell, you say your piece, and then I have a bit that I'll chime in on as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, listen, and that's kind of the reasoning behind setting up the ICR, in the first place, the Harkins Shark Tank, right? Is this is an employee-owned company. At the end of the day, there's only one place that any of the profits go, in one form or another. They all go to 370 employee owners, right? No matter where it comes from. And so the concept of putting some money up every year to fund people's ideas on the off chance that, either they'll help operational efficiency or they'll make somebody's life easier, or maybe it becomes a profitable subsidiary company if the idea is successful. All that is doing is those employee owners putting up some cash and saying, yeah, we think it's worth it. Let's invest in it. Long term, all that's going to do is build out, the share value for everybody's retirement, right? At the end of the day. So, I mean, if TeamWeave's ultimately very successful, and, which all indications are it's going to be, and we continue to grow that customer base within the industry. I mean, not only are we solving problems like Patrick said, and I can tell you personally, one of my favorite things is when I hear back from that person we just onboarded 5 weeks ago, and they're like, my God, this is saving me so much time. I'm like, yes, right? Those are the wins for me. But yeah, I mean, you're building a whole subsidiary that's building value for the ESOP, right? Which is everybody's retirement. So everybody in the company is invested in seeing its success, which means you have 350 people with connections in the industry who are, obviously going to go out and say, "Hey, this thing's great," which is super helpful when you're a startup. There's a lot of synergistic positives with it, but doing it in an employee-owned company, and again, just benefiting everybody who have had the initial desire to put the cash up in the first place and say, yeah, take it out of the bottom line. Let's go see what we can do with this thing. I mean, general
It's awesome.
contractors typically invest their money pretty conservatively anyway, right? So, what's our potential return on this chunk of cash if we go do this thing versus, just leave it sitting in an account making X%. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of when you have something winning like that, once we identified we had a winning product, it's kind of a no brainer, right? From an ESOP perspective, right?
Oh, I love it. I think and whether you hold or whether you sell, as long as it's successful, it's contributing to that bottom line, right? But like so many software companies are hamstrung by the fact that like they have a person with a great idea that doesn't have the money that goes out and raises money, but the people that they're getting the money from are expecting an exit in a fairly well-defined date at a fairly well-defined value. And and we all kind of know them, right? Like the software companies that were awesome until they were bought, and now they suck, kind of thing. And you're not hamstrung by those parameters. And at the same time, should an opportunity present itself for you to create a valuable sale of this business, that's another thing that the company can choose to do. I can also imagine a little bit of potential drawbacks here and there, and having to compete internally for other spend, and different than third party funding that way, that we just dump cash into this thing. But no, it's awesome that you've been able to even get it to this point, let alone where I think the things are destined to go for you guys.
Yeah, I think as I think through that exact thing, and Russell, you're spot on with the ICR and why we created it, right? It's to give back, but like TeamWeave is so unique as a product and as a subsidiary for two reasons. There is no pressure from investors. There's no, you have to hit these metrics. You have a 6-month runway or else you're out of money and it's game over. It's not like that, right? We are here and we're well funded, we're well sourced, we're growing the team, we're growing the product, and there aren't these deadlines and these metrics that are absolutely critical for us to hit, or else poof, you're gone. And that gives us a little bit of breathing room to really sit down and think deeply about the value that the product is providing, and to continue to develop the product in a way that is not rushed and is not focused on top line, but is actually focused on the consumer and the value that it's bringing to their organization. And then number two, the fact that it comes out of a construction company, that this was a problem that we felt internally, and then that pain is now translated into the external product that is now the user interface and the user experience for anyone who comes on board. I mean, how unique is that, right? I mean, this is not some like, just venture idea that was funded by billionaires in Silicon Valley. This is a pain that was realized by the people who sit and have sat in the shoes of the users for years. And that's why it was built. And I think that's so important, when considering the culture of a company that you're going to be partnering with as a vendor, and the value add that any of your software partners bring to an organization. To have that backing, an ESOP backing, a culture like that is product and value add first and people first rather than top line revenue first. I think that's incredibly interesting. But the other thing, Chad, and for us, again, with the ICR, it kind of all ties back within Harkins, is it allows us an opportunity to diversify. What Russell's saying is, within any good portfolio, any fiduciary, is going to say, diversify your portfolio, right? And for us, this is another way to diversify how we are taking that money, that investment from the ESOP and from our people, and putting it into something that can bring value to the entire industry now, and not just Harkins, because the old cliche, we hear it all the time, raising tides raise all ships.
Awesome. No, I that's another one of my pet topics, is diversifying revenue streams. And I talk about it all the time with our clients that get to a point in their business. Look, this isn't for everybody at every time. There's a time to fix your machine because you are struggling to run a profitable construction company, right? That is probably not the time to go diversifying your portfolio when you can't turn a profit as it stands. But for our clients that are consistently knocking the cover off the ball, I'm always challenging them to think about how they can add stability through diversification. And I don't think I've ever advised them to open a software company, but I just might. I just might. Usually I'm like, man, well, you ought to get into trash, you ought to get into, into dumpsters, or something along those. I'm not usually advising on this, but no, I think it's, why not? Right? Why not? If you have the, if you have the horsepower to do it, and Lord knows you don't, nobody knows the problem better than you. And if you actually have the people who can develop a product, develop a solution, it's a great path forward. And I can imagine, at least in my mind, the best products supporting our industry really should and could come from it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, there's something to be said about that when you develop a product that's really truly like born from the pain point, and the people who are living it every day are designing that function and that button and how this works and what that workflow is. I mean, it shows at the end, as opposed to somebody from the outside trying to figure things out, talk to a bunch of people, build something, go see how it works and how it's received, take feedback, change it. It's kind of like getting your own incubator for 2 years before the thing hits the market.
And I will say, I think you're going to see some more of this as the times progress. I think that we may be a little bit earlier on the curve, just because technology in general is so new to this industry. I mean, I think about, being an intern in college in 2011, 2012, and I was still doing quality control checklists on a clipboard and filing daily logs into a file cabinet in the back of our trailer. And here we are now with all of this, cloud-based software, whether it's Autodesk Construction Cloud or Procore, whatever, where all of that is now digitized. You kind of are starting to see, I think, the early stages of the results of that with, something like what we've done with TeamWeave is happening. And I do see other examples. I mean, you think about construction companies, and for years and years, there's been horizontal or vertical types of integration, right? Where GCs will become developers, or GCs will self-perform, or GCs might open up an architectural wing or something like that,
Sure.
right? A design wing. And I think of some of the leaders in innovation technology in our industry, and you look at the folks at Suffolk or the folks at DPR, the folks at Turner, some of these massive conglomerate, the billions and billions of dollar revenue companies. And they have, I think DPR just released a procurement software that is available for purchase for the entire industry now. I believe, Suffolk Technologies, which is an offshoot of Suffolk Construction, has invested in multiple softwares and has even spun out a few themselves. So I think that you will start to see this as a natural progression within an industry that has always kind of looked to integrate both vertically and horizontally, as another way that starts to occur. Because, like you said, what better place for the solution to a problem to come from than the people who feel that pain of the problem themselves?
Awesome. Yep. Agreed. Seeing that trend for sure. I think a lot of the time it is a pure business play, and some of the time it is a solution play that they've spotted. And I just think organically solving the problem for yourself, and then realizing that what you designed could actually solve this problem broadly, and then actually having the will to take the thing to market. I get one last question as we run up on time. Practically, is it tenable for people working in their business in roles supporting Harkins to also run and grow a software business? And do you imagine a point where you say, hey, this needs to be our full-time focus?
Yeah, well, sure. I mean, yeah, I would say it's no different than that kind of resource allocation for the project manager, right? You got to decide where you're going to put your time and how much you're going to spend on it, and where you're going to put that time and focus. So, I mean, yeah, as long as you've got the support within the broader organization to cover all the bases that you need to cover, then absolutely. But I mean, that's why we've made the hires that we've made over the last year. So we kind of that first year was that proof of concept, right? That kind of
Right.
flying
Does
under
this
the
thing have any
radar.
legs?
And
Yeah.
and so to do that, was very doable. And then, but to scale it, you've got to bring folks on. I mean, that's why we just brought on in-house developers. We've got a VP of software growth that's just joined. We're expanding the sales team. You need to do all those things. You can only
Nice.
take it so far, in that first mode. But yeah,
So there's
totally
a
doable.
growing TeamWeave org chart inside
Correct.
yeah,
Oh,
good.
right
Good
on.
for
Yeah,
you
when you
guys.
decide you've got to scale that, you have to decide to put some serious resources behind it.
You have to.
There comes an inflection point, right, when you got to do that. And for us, that was last year. So that's what's leading to all the growth we've been having this year.
That's awesome. That is awesome. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for being with me today for the Well Built podcast. If people wanted to chat with you and brainstorm because they were inspired or learn about your product or any of those types of things, where would you steer them?
Reach out to us on LinkedIn. Our numbers should be up there. Email addresses are up there. I would love to chat with any of you who find this story intriguing, or, quite frankly, might be working on something yourselves. The best conversations and the best ideas that I get come from those types of chats. So don't be shy. I'm a talker, and would love to go into more detail on the story. If anyone out there listening is interested, reach out to me, Patrick Hennessy, on LinkedIn, or Russell Tipton as well.
Well, Patrick, Russell, thank you for being with us today. We will keep our eyes on you. I'll certainly continue to spread the word myself as I'm seeing what you're doing works.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having us, Chad.
Yep. Thanks.
Talk
Chad.
soon,
Appreciate
guys.
it.
Later.
Take care.
All right. Awesome, Chad.
There it is.